Hello, Rob, the editor of the Biomedical Scientist magazine here. Welcome to the latest instalment of the IBMS Chats podcast. Each episode is based on the Twitter Spaces chats that take place on the first Wednesday of every month. In this first episode, we discuss the different routes that IBMS members can take to get their work published. I'm joined by Cherie Beckett, a senior biomedical scientist working in microbiology, and Simon Hoggart, the partner journal development manager for the British Journal of Biomedical Science. I hope you enjoy the episode, and remember that this can be used for your CPD.
Hi, thank you everyone for joining our space this month. I'm Aisha from the IBMS comms team. Tonight we're going to be talking about how members can get their work published with IBMS publications, namely the BJBS and the Biomedical Scientist. We're fortunate enough to have Rob Dabrowski, editor of the Biomedical Scientist, Simon Hoggart, journal development manager for the BJBS, and Cherie Beckett, senior biomedical scientist, all joining us today for our IBMS chat. Before we get started, we have a few simple housekeeping points. Please firstly remember that this space is public, meaning that anyone can listen, and the session will be recorded so those who can't attend can catch up later. If you want to request to speak, please request to join the group of speakers by pressing request at the bottom left-hand corner on your screen. Only 10 people can be in one speaker group at one time, so we'll do our best to hear from as many of you as possible. You can also take part by tweeting us a reply by pressing the purple speech button bubble that should be in the bottom right of your screen. Finally, our regular IBMS chat thread is still live, so you can also chat over there if you want to chat over there as well. So I'm just going to hand it over to our co-host now.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. You've got three of us tonight. You've got Cherie, Simon and me. I'm Rob. I think Simon was due to go first, but he is not quite in the chat yet. I think he was having some trouble finding the link. So I'll kick off to tell you a bit about myself. My name's Rob Dabrowski. I'm the editor of the Biomedical Scientist magazine. I've worked in health and science publishing for the last decade, before which I wrote and edited supplements and magazines for publications ranging from academic peer-reviewed journals through to national newspapers and international magazines. Now, hopefully most of you know what the Biomedical Scientist is, as it either pops into your inbox on your computer or through your letterbox each month. But just in case anyone listening who isn't a member and doesn't get it or hasn't picked it up for a while, the Biomedical Scientist is the official monthly membership magazine of the IBMS. As the leading professional publication for biomedical science, it features current professional and scientific developments, news, events, IBMS CPD approved activities and job listings, and it's delivered monthly, either by post or electronically. And the aim, not the official aim written down anywhere, but my aim with the magazine, is to try and engage with, inform and entertain members. So yeah, that's a quick summary of who I am and the angle I'll be coming from. I'm going to pass you over to Cherie now while I go and try and find Simon. Back in a sec.
This is live, isn't it? So all live things have a few little hiccups, but we're just going to run with it. So good evening, everyone. First of all, a massive thank you for those joining us tonight, or if you're listening on catch up, again, thank you. Just to introduce myself, my name's Cherie. I'm currently an acting senior biomedical scientist in an NHS diagnostic clinical microbiology laboratory. And this is in an NHS hospital. My background is largely in microbiology, although at the very, very beginning of my career, I did start off in haematology. Discuss amongst yourselves about your different disciplines, but I quite like micro. Okie doke. I'm also an associate lecturer on the BSc Biomedical Science degree course at Anglia Ruskin. So some of you might know me as setting up or assisting in the setting up of IBMS Chat back in 2018. And this I developed really as a way of facilitating some way of regular communication between our network, between biomedical scientists, between healthcare technical officers, between medical laboratory assistants, managers, anybody that works in the laboratory field. And of course, many of our biomedical scientists are actually not in the laboratory anymore. So just between the biomedical science network. So we come together once a month to discuss a loosely set topic. In the past, you may have seen this over Twitter in the chat. chatting, tweeting, and then now we've moved over to Spaces. And I think actually really a nice collaborative network has blossomed, and it's free from hierarchy, free from the physical barriers of geography. And they serve as an excellent way of carrying out CPD, but also for advice, networking, and even friendship. So while I'm on that point, actually, any ideas about what you'd like to listen to, about what you'd like to get involved in, because we would love to have different hosts, lots of people speaking. What do you want to hear about? What sort of topics perhaps haven't we covered, or what niche areas would you love to know about? If we can get a specialist host in, that would be fantastic. So please feed all your ideas through to the IBMS, and they would be really, really welcomed. So I thought I'd open up with my experience of publishing, but I've just seen that Simon's jumped on. So perhaps before I chat a little bit more, Simon, are you ready to jump in and just introduce yourself and your background and a bit about the BJBS?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Thanks, Cherie. So yeah, my name's Simon Hoggart. I work for Frontiers. So my role with the IBMS is I'm a slight mouthful, but my job title is Partner Journal Development Manager, which loosely translates as I work with the IBMS and the editor-in-chief on running the BJBS, so the British Journal of Biomedical Science, on a sort of day-to-day basis. So yeah, I work with people at the IBMS and the editor-in-chief on developing and growing a journal. So that might involve kind of reaching out to people, talking to them about their submissions, maybe kind of events like this as well, and kind of talking to people about how the publication process works and kind of how to get published, kind of thing. Before joining Frontiers and working with a team on the BJBS, I used to work at another society. Well, I used to work at a society and another sort of selection of society journals. So I was at the British Ecological Society, where I worked on a number of leading ecological journals, and the journals at the BES were publishing both open access and subscription journals. So kind of maybe the differences between open access and subscription might be something we get into a little later on. And prior to that, I actually kind of got into publishing as kind of through research. So prior to joining the BES, I did a PhD in ecology, did a postdoc, and then kind of ended up finding my way in the world of academic publishing. So that's me. Thank you.
Fantastic. So I'll kick off then, and I'm quite happy to share my experience of publishing. Don't know if anyone in the audience has had any experience of publishing that they'd love to share. Please raise your hand and request to speak. Absolutely fine. If you'd like to put it in the chat box, again, absolutely fine. But I'll share my experience, and maybe it's something you can resonate with. So I'm quite academic by nature. And when I was doing my BSc Biomedical Science degree, I knew that when I did my dissertation, I would probably do something work-based. So I studied on a part-time day release basis. But I knew that I was going to do something work-based, and I thought, you know what, I would love to get my dissertation published. But would it be the right standard? How would I even go about it? But I just kind of knew that was the ultimate goal for me, if I could. Thinking about, others might appreciate the work that I did. So I did a verification and validation and an evaluation on 4 different methods that looked to screen for a particular type of antibiotic resistance, so carbapenem resistance, and a particular type of carbapenem resistance caused by carbapenemases. So these are enzymes that can render such antibiotic resistance. So this paper title in the end was a comparison of phenotypic methods for the screening of carbapenem resistant and carbapenemase producing Enterobacteriaceae. Mouthful. So I looked at different methods. I did my evaluation in the laboratory, but as I say, I knew right from the beginning I really wanted to try to publish. So I started to be really, really, really particular with my notes, with all of my research, and I meticulously detailed every single step of my research and then my practical investigations. I carried out an enormous amount of research, and this would later serve as a nice introduction to my paper, but it also helped me to gain a feel for what's been done before and how, and what readers might want to read about, but crucially, what our laboratory would need, because that was the basis of my dissertation. So completed my dissertation, completed the write-up, came to the end of my degree, and I thought, you know what, I really still do want to publish this, but I have no idea where to start. For me, it was contacting my university supervisor that supervised my dissertation, and I said, you know, look, I really want to try to publish this. Is this even suitable? Am I trying to shoot too high? But where do I start? So we sat together and we thought about different journals, and we did actually approach the BMJ, and it's perhaps in my naivety that we did that, because I've since learned, you know, different journals have different requirements, and we'll go over to Rob and to Simon after my section and just find out a little bit about that. But as I say, I had no idea. I just knew I wanted to get it into a journal, and I wanted to get my name out there, but also I wanted to get my research out there, and it might help other people in my position or other laboratories with this, back then, emerging type of resistance. So, as I say, contacted BMJ and was knocked back. We then thought about JAC, so the Journal of Antimicrobial Chemotherapy. Initially, looked okay. We did several drafts, and that was actually quite grueling. Different journals have, I found, different journals have different requirements. So they'll want different lengths, they'll want different types of referencing. So having to edit each time, but ultimately I did get knocked back by JAC. And again, it's only now through experience that I realised, do you know what, it really wasn't appropriate with my small sample size and my in-house laboratory validation of existing methods. You know, it was done before. It was very, very valuable to us in the laboratory, but not really as a niche piece for some of these very big players out there in the publishing field. So knocked back, and I thought, but I really do want to get this out. And I actually had a chat with Rob, and I thought, actually, this type of research is more suited for the IBMS Gazette, or what is known now as the Biomedical Scientist. And that's because its readers are more people like you and I. So biomedical scientists or laboratory professionals, managers, students, people who would then start to look at this type of testing in the laboratory and then perhaps springboard on and think, you know, that method might work well for us, or, you know, actually Cherie's paper said that this method wasn't very good. I'm going to try it out myself, you know, that sort of thing. So actually I did publish in the end in the Biomedical Scientist, and I actually got quite a bit of good feedback off of the back of that. Readers that had read it and thought, oh, okay, I'd just like to pass on a few comments. So that was really, really nice for me, actually, because I'd just started out as a biomedical scientist, and it did help to get my name out there. It helped to form a few connections with Rob and the team at the Biomedical Scientist, but also the IBMS team, and connect with other biomedical scientists. So if you are interested, it is still available on the Biomedical Scientist journal. So that's the biomedicalscientist.net. And on there, if you was to search phenotypic methods, it's dated the 29th of January 2018. It's still available. That's the sort of thing that at the time Rob accepted. So it might be something that sort of gives you a bit of an inkling as to what they do publish, but I'm sure Rob will be able to give us much more information as we go on. So sort of to sum up my experience, it really did teach me so much. So from meeting a word count and sticking to it, as you can see now, I can chat for ages, being clear and concise, being resilient. And actually, I think that really does apply to a lot of different scenarios. Being knocked back is hard, and then having to submit again and wonder, am I actually going to get my work out there? Is it worth it? Yes, it's worth it in the end, but at the time, yeah, it's a bit tricky. Meeting a deadline. We all have to meet deadlines constantly, but this was really difficult to meet the deadlines stipulated by different journals, and so much more. So anyone at this point, if we just take a really brief pause, got any thoughts? Anyone want to share their experience in publishing? Anyone want to publish?
Just as a quick reminder for everyone, if you do want to speak, then there's a little button you press and I'll pop your hand up and then we can give you kind of permission to speak.
No, okay, that's absolutely fine. As I say, if you're not happy on raising your hand, no problem at all. Just pop a message in the chat box or on the normal Twitter app. We've all got different screens open, so we're trying to monitor everything. So I've certainly got some questions I would like to ask on behalf of everyone tonight. Simon, I think I'll ask you first. My burning question, obviously I've shared my reasons for publishing, but why publish? Why publish actually in a peer-reviewed journal? Because this is the type of journal that really we want to get our work in. And what does the BJBS look for?
But I guess to answer your first question, I guess the reason to publish in a sort of peer-reviewed journal is, I guess, long and short of it, you will ultimately reach more people. So papers published in kind of peer-reviewed academic journals, particularly like the IBMS, which is an established journal and is indexed in many places, is your work is discoverable through kind of multiple databases. So, for example, the BJBS is all the papers are archived in places like PubMed. So that's where somebody is kind of doing any kind of literature search on key medical research will go to. But there's a host of other places that the BJBS and academic journals are published in. So they're all in Web of Science, which I'm sure people use for any kind of literature search they're doing, in places like Scopus, even places like Google Scholar as well. The journal articles will be found in. So I guess compared to the Biomedical Scientist, the work is discoverable to an international audience.
But what's the difference between peer-reviewed then and something that's not peer-reviewed? Is there a difference?
Well, yeah, of course there is a difference, and that's kind of the thing which kind of sets the two kind of outlets apart. So, I mean, peer review is actually a process. So, peer review is the process of the paper that's submitted to a journal being reviewed by peers in the community. So, other experts in the field will read, review and evaluate the work that's submitted to the journal, and then provide you with feedback on how to improve the work so that it's suitable for both the journal and its readership, and it's reaching certain quality standards. So it's kind of articles which have been peer reviewed. It's kind of see it as a sort of seal of quality for their reputability and trustworthiness.
Can I quickly jump in and ask Simon, what are the what are the levels where it's kind of automatically, as soon as it arrives in the inbox, it's like, nope, that's going out the door. We're not moving forward with that. We're not progressing. I mean, are there things like ethical approval that you need to definitely sort out? If someone is at home now and they're starting research for the first time, what are those things they should make sure are in place before they do anything else, just to make sure that at least it doesn't get kicked out first thing?
Well, yeah, so there's some very basic ones. So having the correct ethical approval is clearly one. Many journals now are asking for the data to have some sort of data archiving requirements, so where you make any kind of data that you've used in your article publicly available. So yeah, you need ethical approval both kind of for the work that you're doing and maybe from your institutional department. Beyond that, you've got to look at kind of the what's outlined on the individual journal's website. So then you might be getting into kind of more technical areas. So kind of how robust the journals might be wanting the study to be, what's typically they might look for in kind of sample size. It's a bit tricky for me to get into too much detail in that regard, because that's kind of up to the editors in chief of each of those journals. But you can kind of get a feel for what those sort of requirements are by looking at the journal website, the kind of the author guidelines, and also at kind of published papers in the journal. And is your work kind of similar to other work that's published in that journal?
So I'm just wondering then, is the BJBS, is that open access, or is there a better type of journal to go for, open access or subscription? Do you have to pay?
Yeah, so BJBS is now an open access journal. So by being open access, it means that the article is free to read for anybody in the world for all time. So anybody can access the article and read it. It's not, if compared to a journal, compared to an article, it's in a subscription journal. So it means that to be able to read the article and read the journal, you need to subscribe to the journal, like you would subscribe to kind of a magazine and that you might get off like a magazine. So the difference about open access is anybody can read it. The other difference is that in order to publish in that journal, you need to pay what's kind of called in the industry an APC, an article processing charge, i.e. you need to pay to publish in the journal. So the BJBS is now on an open access model. Luckily for everybody here, as part of your membership, the IBMS is covering the APCs for all members. So if you're a member, you can actually still publish in the BJBS for free, but that wouldn't be the case for other open access journals.
Okay. So I guess we should probably really start with what does the BJBS look for? Does it have a specialism, or tell me a bit about the journal?
Well, maybe the best place for me to start is maybe if I read out the aims and scope of the journal. So every journal makes clear what the aims and scope of the journal, which basically summarises the type of work they want to take. So this is reading directly from the website. So the British Journal of Biomedical Science is committed to publishing high quality original research that represents a clear advance in the biomedical science. So I guess the take home for that first part is the work's got to be original, it's got to be new, it's got to be novel. And it also publishes reviews that summarise recent advances in the field. The overall aim of the journal is to provide a platform for the dissemination of new and innovative, so there's that bit again, research and technology on the diagnosis and management of diseases that are of interest to the practicing laboratory scientist. So the journal is broad scope cover anything that kind of any research that a biomedical scientist is likely to be doing. It then goes on to say, we will welcome in vitro and in vivo experimental studies that explore the pathophysiological mechanisms underlying human disease, in addition to studies that translate these findings to clinical diagnosis and patient management. So I have to hold my hand up now and say I'm not a biomedical scientist. So maybe this might mean more to some of you in this space than it does to me. But the key take homes are that the journal is trying to reach the kind of, it's got broad scope covering all of the sort of biomedical scientists, but a key aspect is the work has to be new and novel.
Great. Okay. I was just wondering whether someone needs to be in research then, or if they can just be in the laboratory. I don't know if anyone in the audience has got any thoughts on that, or do you have experience of people that have submitted articles? Are they on the bench, so to speak?
What somebody's background is we don't. It's not. Oh, how to put it? We don't. It doesn't matter what somebody's background is. They could, as long as the work is of interest to the journal. There's no kind of looking at somebody's background isn't kind of brought into the decision making process.
Yeah. Fab. Okay then. Okay. So then we've identified that maybe we're looking at publishing in the BJBS. What would be first? How do we prepare our manuscript for submission, so to speak?
Well, I guess the first place to start would be to look on the journal website to look at what the requirements are. But the BJBS is not really doing anything particularly unusual. So kind of a standard kind of formatting would be okay. So we're looking for the article needs to have an abstract, needs to have an introduction, needs to have a method section, a results section, and then some sort of discussion.
Okay.
It's important that the word count is adhered to, but it's not as important as it used to be, actually, interestingly. One of the changes of the journal moving to Frontiers and going online only is it means the journal's actually also, well, so I've said that, it's online only. So there's less, the word count isn't as strict as it used to be. So the article would need to be formatted in kind of the sort of standard formatting as you would for any journal. But yeah, the best place to start would be looking at the author guidelines that's on the journal website. You'd find on any journal website, it details the author guidelines for any article type that journal takes.
Okay. So let's think then. So we've identified the BJBS, we've prepared our manuscript for submission, we've looked on the website and we've included the standard format, we've loosely kept to the word count and we've submitted it. We know that from what you've said is going to be peer reviewed. Mm-hmm. Then what happens, I'm guessing you're either going to get a rejection or acceptance. So I touched on rejection. What would someone do then if it wasn't what you were looking for? Is it a simple no, or is it a no and here's a bit of feedback? How does that work?
Well, let's take a step back a bit, if that's okay, and just kind of quickly whiz through kind of the peer review process, because it can appear a bit of a black box to lots of people. You sort of submit your manuscript, stuff happens to it, then you get a decision at the end. So it's kind of useful to look at the kind of steps that go that happens to a manuscript once it's been submitted.
Yeah, great, thanks.
So the BJBS has got a relatively standard peer review process. Some journals might differ, but kind of broadly, for most journals, you'll submit a manuscript. The first people that look at it would be kind of the people in the kind of what we call the editorial office. So people a bit like me, we just make sure it makes those kind of very basic requirements. So has it got an ethics statement? Is it formatted more or less okay? If it kind of makes those basic checks, it then gets passed on to an editor-in-chief. They take a kind of top level look at the manuscript and ask questions like, is it broadly in scope for the journal? Is the sample size sufficient? Is there enough replication in the analysis? And if it kind of makes those top level checks, they then pass it on to somebody who's more specialist. So at the BJBS, they are called deputy editors. Other journals will call a person in that role maybe an associate editor. But person in that role, they're doing similar things. They're taking a more detailed look at it, asking similar questions to the editor-in-chief, but specific to the field of research that paper is on. So they're getting more subject specific now. If they think the paper is suitable, they then send it out to peer review, and that's when there's a real detailed look at the manuscript. Most journals, BJBS including, try to appoint 2 reviewers. So once the manuscript's been peer reviewed, and the review reports will come back in, the associate editor or deputy editor will make an assessment, write a report to the editor-in-chief, who will then communicate a decision to the author. And those decisions can be, well, they can be accepted, obviously. They can be rejected, as discussed. When you first submit your manuscript, it's very unlikely that the first decision will be accept. It's likely that you'll be asked to make changes and revisions before it then goes on to be accepted. So this is the kind of the rounds of revision that you were referring to earlier, I think, Cherie.
Can I quickly jump in and ask Simon, when I briefly worked on a peer review journal about 10 years ago, and it didn't have quite as good an impact factor as you have. But one of the things I remember from the peer review process is the occasional exciting moment when the 2 peer reviewers vehemently disagreed, and someone was saying this is great and someone was saying this is awful because of this reason. Yeah. How often does that happen, and who makes the call on what happens with those papers?
Well, ultimately we'd be looking to the editor-in-chief to make that call. How regularly does that happen? I mean, it's not uncommon. It's not unheard of. It's not. I mean, it's not uncommon, but it's not a kind of common occurrence either. It's not something you'd be surprised to see. Okay. But that's when you're looking for the kind of the editor-in-chief and the deputy editor to kind of step in and come out with a coherent understanding from the 2 reviewer reports for what's the kind of best course of action for that manuscript. Okay. I think it's interesting also, Cherie, that you talked about rejection. I think there's a joke in the kind of academic field of rejection is the rules, what people say. So I guess it's a useful kind of mantra to carry with you, because don't take it personally if you're rejected. It happens to everybody all the time, every day. It's kind of part of life if you're trying to get your work published. And I guess the thing to remember is, if your paper's been out for peer review, it's been rejected, you'll still have comments on your manuscript, which will ultimately help you improve it. It will and hopefully get it published somewhere else instead.
I think that's actually good that you've mentioned that, most of your articles will have some alterations in the beginning. So it's almost like you kind of have to assume perhaps that it could be rejected, but like you say, don't take it personally, and then make those changes and resubmit, or select another journal if the feedback suggests as such. But it's quite reassuring actually that, not to take it personally, and it happens all the time.
Yes.
So then let's flip that. Let's say the article gets accepted, whether it's after alterations or not. What happens then?
I guess what happens then is it moves to the process called production. So it moves to our team in the production team at Frontiers. If it's accepted by BJBS, they will produce the kind of final, what we call typeset manuscript. So the versions of the papers that you see in places like PubMed, Google Scholar, Web of Science. So they will produce kind of three different versions, really. You'll see the PDF, which might be most common seeing. If you go on journal websites, publishers tend to take you to what we describe as an HTML version, and they also produce kind of lots of metadata to allow the article to be indexed in these repositories that I was referring to before. So once your paper's published, Frontiers, for example, will send all the metadata associated to that paper to places like PubMed, Web of Science, so it can be indexed and be discoverable in those repositories. I guess, but I guess in some ways that's as far as kind of the publisher's job sort of finished. It's then published, hosted on the website. But in some ways, that's where the next job for you as the author starts, really, is promoting the work, getting it out there, promoting it on, Twitter, blogs, talking about it in places like this, talking about it with your colleagues, sharing it with your colleagues. So yeah, when you do get work published, do not forget to promote it as much as you can.
That's really useful, actually. So we've covered loads, and I appreciate you're probably looking to grab a quick glass of water. I'd like to just finish sort of with you, Simon, you mentioned about what BJBS is generally about. Some journals have sort of special issues. Is that something BJBS do from time to time?
Yeah, BJBS is doing a few more of those now. They're a nice way of collecting manuscript articles together on a particular theme or topic. And actually, it's nice that you bring that up now, actually, Cherie. We've just launched a new one on education and training in the biomedical sciences. So that might be of interest to some people here. You can go and find it on the BJBS website. And it's actually being led by one of our editorial board members, somebody who I think has spoken in this forum before. Cherie Scott is one of the is on here on the special issue. So yeah, the nice way of bringing papers together on particular topics.
Oh, so now I'm starting to think. You mentioned, just one more question, sorry, about making sure the research was new and novel, recent advances. For something perhaps less scientific in terms of data or methodologies, would that still apply to education and training? Or is there a little bit of a different set of guidelines, if you like, when you have your special issues?
Yes, there will be manuscripts of that for this, particularly for this education specialist. We might need to be kind of approaching those and handling them and thinking about them in slightly different ways. But I suppose some of the top level points still are still relevant. So it needs to be maybe new ways of thinking, new ways of approaching a teaching problem. New teaching methodologies. So there's got to be and there's got to still be a novel aspect in there somewhere.
Good, brilliant.
But
Grab yourself
this specialist, do feel free to reach out to both. Well, me in the editorial office, or Cherie, or any of the other guest editors directly as well. They'd welcome any questions that people may have.
Fab. Grab yourself a drink, Simon. I have absolutely grilled you.
No problem.
How you feeling, Rob? Because you're next.
Yeah, very well. Thank you. Very well.
Good. So I'm going to put similar questions to you then. Obviously, you look after the biomedical scientist. So why should we publish in the BMS? And what are the benefits? What do you look for you and your team?
I would say the main reason you're going to want to publish is because you've got something that you want to say. And it's quite different from the peer review side of things, where you have to have done research and have been very invested in it. It can be a tiny little thing that you've done in your lab where you think, this has made a difference. I wish more people knew about this. And then it's the perfect platform to tell them, because it gets delivered through every member's letterbox or into their emails. And so I'd say the most important thing is to have something you want to tell people about. There's also, it's great for CPD and reflection and looking back on the work you've done. Also increasing the workforce knowledge. You know, we're a workforce, or I can't say we because I'm not actually a biomedical scientist, but the biomedical science workforce is a workforce that is stuck in labs behind doors, and anything that we can do to kind of have some kind of cross-pollination of ideas, I think is a really great thing, which is why, you know, going to Congress, Biomedical Scientist Live, this chat, they're all really good ways of spreading information between the profession, which I think is a really important thing to do. And I suppose publishing in the magazine is another way of doing that. Also, enjoyment. Like, some people enjoy writing, some people might not. I do, otherwise I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. But there can be a lot of satisfaction in seeing something from having this first initial idea and then taking it through to the final thing, where you get hopefully a nice, beautifully laid out article in the magazine, something to be proud of. And enjoying the process as well. There are, with all kind of processes, there are things that you learn and things that you can reflect upon. And I would say, you know, writing an article is no different, where you will, looking back on it as you try and structure your article, you might actually see what you've done, how you've done it, and recognize something that you didn't know at the start of writing the article, if that doesn't sound too pretentious and convoluted.
No, yeah, spot on. And I really like that you said something to say. I've written it down, actually. Something to say can be something tiny and making a difference. And that actually really encapsulated why I wanted to publish those. I had something to say, and I wanted to tell people. So I think regardless of what journal perhaps people are looking at, it's that something to say. So someone's got something to say. How can they say it in the Biomedical Scientist? I know from reading it every month that there are different features. Are they something you can talk about, just to sort of share with everybody what sort of features you have? If they're not looking at, let's take my dissertation, for example, if they're not looking at something to say in terms of the research they've done, what else could they say in the Biomedical Scientist?
I mean, there are, I suppose there are two kind of standard entryways to the magazine. One of which is the big question, one of which is my lab. So they're both regular features we have in the magazine each month. My lab is the one where I get to meet a lot of biomedical scientists through this and kind of continue working with them. It's really a gateway into the magazine. My lab is almost like a kind of a guided tour of the lab, but written down on paper. So you talk about the ethos behind your lab, the work you're doing, the tests you're running, the equipment, the team, the atmosphere. And it's also like because labs are, the idea behind this was because labs are behind closed doors, people don't just get to wander around them. And it would be nice if we could put down on paper this kind of thing where people can wander around the lab. So it's almost like you turn up at the lab, walk in, and they say, hey, here are the people that work with us. We've got, 3 healthcare assistants over there, this bench over here where that's happening. And it's a really good way of raising the profile of your lab, especially if you think you've done something interesting or you're doing something that you think other people should know about. Or you might be head of the lab and you might think, my team's been through a really tough time. I want to lift morale a little bit. It's a good way of doing that. So that's one of them. And another one is called The Big Question. This is one where I'm always looking for fresh people to come onto this. It's one where we ask 3 people exactly the same question and we print their answers verbatim. And it's just nice to have fresh perspectives on these pages. And you don't have to be an expert in the field at all, because it's just a short, I think it's 240 words per person. So, and we run a lot of stuff that's, say, quite topical compared to some of the magazines, which might be based on some research or some lab innovation. This might be based on, for example, should we still be worrying about COVID, or is everything sorted out now and we're all fine? And, everyone's got opinions on that, and everyone's opinions are equally valid. So we don't just want to hear from virologists on that. We want to hear from across the profession. So, yeah, I'd say it's kind of those regular features are a really good way in. And if anyone does want to be featured on them, just drop me an email. I'm sure my email's knocking around on the website somewhere, but it's rob.dabrowski@redactive.co.uk. And to talk you through an interesting example, we had a MyLab a little while ago from scientist Alex Costello. And she wrote a really nice MyLab for me. She'd never written anything for me before. But yeah, really nice piece, well structured. And it had some interesting stuff about how their lab was falling to pieces and they needed a new lab and how they'd recently gone through the process of sorting out a new lab. We couldn't focus on that completely in the MyLab. We kind of just touched on it. But then we had a chat afterwards. And a couple of issues later, she's got the cover feature with a really nice kind of interesting, almost like a nuts and bolts kind of piece about the steps you go through, almost like we're talking about tonight with publishing. But she was specifically talking about how to get a new lab from the moment you think, oh God, we need a new lab, to the moment when you're working in it and the transition and all that stuff. So yeah, these small little articles can lead to bigger things. And it's always nice to get new voices in the mag. So if anyone wants to get in there, then just let me know.
Brilliant. I've got a question about the big question.
Mm-hmm.
Who picks the question, or can people suggest a question to be asked?
People can definitely suggest a question. What we tend to do is I don't work for the IBMS. I work for a publishing company called Redactive. So I've got people I work with at the IBMS in the communications and membership team. So what we'll do is I'll try and think of some good stuff and keep an eye out for what's going on and what seems timely and topical. And then I'll have discussions with the IBMS about that. But yeah, if anyone has got an idea for one, then do get in touch. We'd always be up for that. But as a slight warning, if you get in touch saying, I've got a really good question, I'd want the answer to this in the magazine, I'm probably going to ask you to answer the question as well. So you'd probably be one of the 3. But I imagine if you want an answer to the question, you've probably got some ideas on it. So
yeah, good. Okay then, so a similar sort of few questions as I did with Simon. Where would somebody start with? They want to get involved in the Biomedical Scientist magazine. How do they pitch their feature? How do they write it? How do they present it in order to get their work out there, or their thoughts, if it's particularly MyLab or the big question?
With the general feature, if we start with that might be the easiest one. I always think the best way to think of it is if you're in, say, you go and meet a friend in a pub or a cafe, like what is the one thing you would tell them about what you want to write about, because often you will have it's a very different skill to writing for a peer-reviewed publication, where you need to set out, you've got your abstract first, and then you've got to set out all your background, your method, and all this stuff before you get to the results and the conclusion. Whereas if you're pitching something to be written up as an article in a magazine or on a website or anything like that, then the most important thing is the bit that comes at the end of that peer-reviewed journal article. It's you want the results and you want the conclusion. So if you were pitching something, you'd say, we did this in the lab, and then this happened because of it, and now this is what's going to happen, which is a bit vague and fluffy. I apologise for that. Say we've got a new machine in, it has increased efficiency by 25%, and we think, I want to write about it here because I think everyone in the country should have this same machine because it's done wonders for us, and I'd like to see it do that for other labs. So that's the type of thing you want to open up with in an email pitch, is just say the most exciting thing about what you want to write about, and then just a couple of lines on why you're well placed to write it, and kind of your experience and background. And that's really it for the pitch. I mean, even if you're not confident about writing at all, then that doesn't matter. As long as you can get your ideas down on the paper and get them over to me, then I can kind of shape it into an article for you. There are also things when it actually comes to writing it that you can bear in mind that will make life a lot easier. There are certain ways of writing features and news pieces. And just so everyone's got this, the easiest one for a feature is to kind of tackle it chronologically. So you start with what was the problem, and then kind of how did we tackle the problem, the obstacles along the way, how we overcame them, the end result, and then what happens next. So people will often get kind of a bit muddled up over the order things need to go in, and it's nowhere near as challenging as it seems. Sometimes you just start at the start and then say, what happened next, what happened next, what happened next, until you kind of completely run out of path, and that's your article finished.
So the pitching actually is, you don't have to have your article all polished and ready. It's just literally, you're just in the beginning, you're just throwing around an idea. So I think that takes away some of the scariness about it. Doesn't have to be finished to start with. Yeah.
I mean, you can do a pitch on on a quick coffee break, if any biomedical scientists still get such a thing. But you can either send in a fully formulated thing saying, I've done this, what do you think? Which is obviously the way you would have to, not the exact way, but that's how you would approach an academic journal. But for a magazine, you can still do that, but you do run the danger of the editor or whoever you sent it to being like, that's really nice, but it's 5,000 words and I could only give you 1,000. In which case you've got to cut it, and it's hard to cut when you've written everything already out. So yeah, quite often the easiest way is just to have your idea, say what it is and why you want to write it, and that's it. Just a few sentences.
Okay, so you've just touched on word count, and I'm just recalling back when Simon said about his journal is online, so the word count can be a little bit flexible. Obviously, I read the hard copy of the Biomedical Scientist, so I know there is a limit to the size of the journal. Is there a word count that's set, or is it flexible on different types of features?
There are some features that are very set. Say, for example, the big question that I talked about, if I ask anyone to take part in that, I'll ask them to send 240 words. And you send 245, that's fine. And sometimes, depending on the topic, you get some really long words, which is quite annoying because then you've got to restructure everything because of long words such as used in your dissertation title, Cherie. Like all kinds of problems. But the rough guideline is we say kind of 500 words per page, and we run some single page features. that they tend to be more the kind of the regular spots. It's quite hard to get enough detail into 500 words to make an article really sing. So I'd say most of the time we're somewhere between 1,000, 1,500 or 2,000. Kind of 2,000, 2,500 is more kind of cover feature type territory. And for regular features, normally about 2 or 3 pages. So 1,000 or 1,500.
Okay, and then last one from me before I ask the audience if they've got any questions. Does the biomedical scientist have any special issues, or do you? I know I see sort of themes from time to time. Is there anything you can comment on about what's coming up in the future, or any special issues?
You know what? I get asked this a lot, and we don't have themes. In magazine, I think it's a really good thing for journals because they can kind of pull together similar content. For me, I feel like for a magazine, I want to base it on what's happening out there in the news and at the cutting edge of research at that particular time. So if I try and kind of put everything into a theme too closely, then you can end up losing some of the most interesting content. And because magazines function in a very different way to academic journals, where magazines, are fast and we put out one every month, and the news articles, I tend to write all the news content for the magazine, and I try and pull it together maybe 1 or 2 days before we go to press, so it's as kind of fresh and as hot as it can be. So because of that, I don't do themed issues for the magazine, but there probably is some accidental theming purely because, we've just been through a pandemic, and I think we probably had about a dozen pandemic-themed issues, not on purpose, but purely because that was the most pressing issue at the time, and that was the issue that everyone wanted to know about. And now when you look at the magazine, you'll still find COVID content in there, but you won't find it in the way that you did kind of a year or so ago when it was hard to open up research databases without finding every piece of medical research being just about COVID. So, so no, we don't strictly. We try and keep it kind of as contemporary, as current, and as kind of news-driven as possible, I suppose.
Bro, so I'm just looking at the clock and we've got 6 minutes left. How on earth is that possible? Has anyone got any more questions they want to feed through? Anyone want to raise their hand, share their experiences at all?
If not, while people think and get typing in that little text box at the bottom of the screen, I'd have a question for Simon, just about with lead times for the magazine. I would say if you pitch me something in February, it could probably be in the April issue of the magazine with kind of turnaround printing times and stuff like that. What are the lead times like with an academic journal, Simon? And does stuff go in on a website before a print magazine, before the print version of the journal? How does that side of things work?
Yeah, it's a good question actually, that, Rob, because I found myself nodding away in the last bit that you're saying about how. I feel like you kind of hit on the key, a real key distinction between the journal and the magazine, and that you are able to be much more timely and contemporary and that bit more newsy, and that's kind of in some way, well, maybe not your only, but very much one of your USPs, isn't it, compared to a journal? Yes, but in answer to your question, publishing in a journal is a slower process, but actually these things are getting much quicker than they used to be. So for BJBS, it's kind of typical peer review times might be more in the region of sort of 3 months, and then we've done quite a lot of work to speed up that production process I was speaking about earlier, and that can be done in as little as sort of 15 days. So from submitting your article to seeing it published, you could see it published in a little over 3 months, which is a hell of a lot quicker than it used to be. And you also touched on kind of a bit of maybe a sort of old way that journals used to work, and kind of by not being in print issues anymore, by things just being published as and when they're ready, it also allows things to get out that's a little bit quicker. And I guess that. Yeah, so that might be something that people want to bear in mind when selecting their journals. Is speed important? Is getting your work out there and published as quickly as possible important to you? That might impact on your decision-making process.
Brilliant.
So I've just checked the chat. Andrea, thanks for joining. Andrew's asked a question for Rob. Do you find certain disciplines are more forthcoming with article ideas than others?
A very good question. I would say, I'd say maybe blood sciences are the transfusion science, hematology. I would say those ones are probably, and I've absolutely no idea why, but I'd say those are the ones I get most submissions from. But because there are so many kind of small, almost like subgenres within biomedical science, there are bits that you will very rarely see featured. We don't run all that much cytology content or veterinary biomedical science, but I suppose that is because those have a far smaller kind of tranche of the membership than some of the bigger disciplines. But if you are from a discipline and you think, why am I not being featured, then drop me a line and let me know, because there's never, I don't have a favorite discipline. We try and give everything equal weighting, and sometimes virology and immunology have been heavily featured over the last kind of few years, more so than they might have done previously. But I'm always trying to balance it up and make sure there's something for everyone. So if you're from an underrepresented discipline, then let me know, and we will try and make it not underrepresented anymore.
Fab. While we've been chatting, I've been trying to find out how many people get the Biomedical Scientist, and I was absolutely astounded to find out it was 19,000. Over 19,000 people either get a hard copy or online views or a student. Simon, I don't know if you've got to hand any metrics on your journal that you'd love to share.
I guess we don't have view. We can't really kind of talk about views per for kind of an issue or something, because kind of views for we more kind of deal in kind of metrics on the article level, so views per article or metrics or whatever. So I think an article which has been quite popular is one on andrology by Stuart Long, and that's got kind of about 10,000 views in the last since it's been published about 8 months ago. You can actually find all of these kind of views and downloads data on the journal web pages. But yeah, we don't really have kind of comparable stats for kind of circulation numbers anymore, by not being in print and not circulating, essentially.
Yeah, no problem. Put you on the spot there. But obviously, crucially, you did say it was open access. So obviously that's, going to reach a wide audience. Andrew's got another question, but Rob, I'm going to leave you to pick that up offline, because we've now hit 9 p.m. Although, let's be honest, we know that IBMS chat does normally carry on past 9 p.m, but we do need to close our live spaces session. So I'd just like to say a massive thank you to Simon and to Rob for sharing their thoughts, their experiences, and their expertise on two very different types of platforms that we can publish or we can share our features and our articles with. As well, a huge thank you to the IBMS for the support of IBMS chat. But massively, a massive thank you to everybody joining us tonight, everybody that's going to tune in for the recording, and the wider IBMS chat network. Happy to take any more questions. Pop them over onto Twitter, on the normal Twitter, so not on Spaces. And I'm sure in the future, Rob and Simon will be more than happy to take any questions. And of course, have all of your lovely ideas for new features that they can use. Rob, Simon, any last remarks?
No. I suppose Andrea Johnson, who says her goal to write for the journal this year, I'll be in touch with some advice and an email from me. Anyone else who wants to write for the journal, or has any questions, or just wants to chat about commas and the use of exclamation points, just get in touch anytime. I'll be happy to have a chat with you.
Yeah, I just want to say
Simon?
thank you for coming. It's been really interesting to speak to you guys about the journal. Thank you.
Lovely. Okay, until next month. Have a good evening, good rest of the week. Bye.
Thanks. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, then why not join us live at 8 p.m. on the first Wednesday of every month, where you can listen to the conversation and even join in by posting questions. Just keep an eye on the IBMS Twitter feed at that time and date and click on the link to join the conversation. Alternatively, keep an eye out here for further podcasts. Thanks for listening, and remember that these episodes can be used for your CPD.